Good evening, everyone. Welcome to new faces. Welcome back to old faces. This is Red Brew Review. My name is Julio, and it's so good to be back on here. I know it's been a good while. I think it's about nearly 4 months. Nearly 4 months since I was last on. I'll take this moment briefly just to catch up and say that life got in the way. Life got in the way about it. University and work and all sorts. So it just took up all my time. But it's good to finally be back. And tonight I bring you. Well, I say tonight. I'm recording tonight. Probably won't be released till during the day tomorrow or at some point. I'm not sure yet. It's been about an hour or so since the full-time whistle went at the Lyon game, and I feel like now, because it's April, it's probably the best time where football clubs look towards the summer. They've already started looking towards the summer, like in terms of transfer business, and not just for purchases, but especially in United's case, player sales. Right now we've got Ruben Amorim's come in, and there's clear need for investment in this squad. But the problem United have is at the moment is United need to sell big, because now United are currently running on a sell to buy basis. Of course, they'll have their budget that they can spend within their means because of the PSR rules, but very much so they need to sell players to fund this rebuild. And as a result, tonight I thought I'd give my opinions on this with a tier list. So if I just get that up here, there we go. As you can see here, I've got a color-coded system. I've got must leave in red, which is they need to go this summer. It's priority, they leave almost. Then we've got leave within the next year. So maybe they don't go this summer, but they should be looked to be moved on perhaps within the next year. Then we've got juries out. So there'll be some players who go in there who have either not been there too long or been there for quite a long time, and we're still not sure what we can do with them. And then we've got will or can come good. I put them in the same bracket because there'll be players who I'm confident will come good given a bit of time, and there are players who I think can come good with a bit of time. So it's very much umming and ahhing about players who can stick around, because it's no use sitting there saying within 2 or 3 years all these players will be gone, because there is a good chance that with the way United will be spending money and moving forward, there will be an element of squad continuity if they can. There'll be players who are still here in 2 or 3 years' time that will still have a role to play, I think, in this system. They just need a bit of time to be properly implemented. And then we've got crucial. Crucial, obviously, I'm sure you can guess what that would mean. You don't need me to explain how you can have key players in there for differing reasons. So as you can see here, obviously, I've got the whole United squad, including the players who are currently out on loan, at least the high-profile ones. Of course, you can see like younger names out on loan like Ethan Wheatley and Dan Gore, but there is conversation to be had, especially about Dan Gore, actually. Someone who was on the fringes potentially for a good while, that people thought, okay, he might come in, but obviously he's gone out on loan more than one occasion. There is discussions to be had for him, actually. There is this sales focus, and hopefully I can, with this color coordinated system, I can, give a good idea of what I think might happen in the next few years, or at least my opinions. So another thing before we get into it, actually, I'm running on two screens here, but one's obviously the webcam there and one's my monitor here. So there'll be times where, because I've got the tier list up on this side, there'll be times when I look across between the two. So I do apologize if it jars you. So yeah. So if we look at why sales matter and the big picture for it, there's four things I want to look at. The first one is obviously financial pressure. So obviously since Sir Alex left, United have spent about 1.6 billion. No Premier League, no Champions League to show for it. On multiple occasions they spent big and still finished outside the top four in that time period. And obviously with the implementation of PSI, United now are in a position where, even though they generate so much revenue, to follow the rules, the sales need to fund this rebuild. And with that, we go into looking at the squad fit. So there's been a lot of criticism, obviously, about the 3-4-3 from pundits, from fans, and there's a lot of people saying that why doesn't, until the end of the season, he operate with something that couldn't get results, and then he can start 3-4-3 from the summer. And I kind of do understand that to an extent, because obviously football is a results-based business, but at the same time, there's a couple of things that we need to look into, which is Amorim left the job mid-season where he could have broken records. He didn't want to come to United mid-season, but he ended up coming to United. And he's basically running with what his philosophy is from the very beginning, because this 6 months, of course, if it was a lot worse than what it was, there might have been more consequences about it. But in the grand scheme of things, he's almost got a free run. And he's going to use this 6 months as like an extra long competitive-based pre-season where he puts his philosophy in practice and sees who in the current squad fits. And I think people forget that the 3-4-3 itself demands specialist profile of players. Even in the Premier League, we've had that. There's evidence of it. So I'll give you an example. So albeit a already winning team, Conte goes into Chelsea, doesn't start with a 3-4-3, but his summer business is almost based around that, which is he comes in, sees the team he's got, and he goes, right, well, I don't have any wing backs, like proper, like flying forward thinking wing backs. I don't have any comfortable ball playing centre halves. I need more legs in midfield, as well as obviously, like they brought Batshuayi that summer as well, who was ended up being a backup to Costa. But all those 3 or 4 key positions were purchased instantly. Marcos Alonso was brought in. Victor Moses was coming back from a loan, but he was almost revolutionized in this. He had no Chelsea career basically when he came back in. I think it spent 3 years out on loan and comes back in and he's almost like a new signing as a right wing back. And then they bring David Luiz back, who is a comfortable ball playing centre half. And obviously they bring in N'Golo Kante to bring the legs in the midfield. And it created that dynamic pivot in midfield between like Matic and Kante, which allowed the 3 central defenders to stay compact and defensively disciplined. And then you could have the wing backs fly forward, and then obviously you've got the forward line with Hazard, Costa, and either Pedro or Willian. So Conte goes to Conte comes in 12 months after they've last won the league under Jose Mourinho, and he still brings in these specialist players. And to top it all off, he gets rid of 3 players within the first 6 months who, to him, were surplus to requirements, but to Jose, they were key players. Oscar didn't fit in the system. He went to China. Mikel, a key player for Chelsea for a number of years, just didn't fit the system. And Conte was like, right, you don't fit my way. I can't play you. Branislav Ivanovic, a player who I thought would actually do well in this system. I thought he'd be great as a right-sided centre-back. He just couldn't cut it in Conte's system, hence why he didn't play that much. Even John Terry, John Terry, captain, they fought tooth and nail to keep with a new contract for another year. I know it sounds crazy to say that John Terry would sign a contract for another year at that time, especially. He'd been at Chelsea his whole career, but like, still, like, he wasn't playing. So, and even when they lost, even when they weren't playing Terry and they, they sold Ivanovic, their idea of a replacement in January was to bring Nathan Ake back from his loan from Bournemouth. And I think that, if anything, that is testament to the fact that 3-4-3 is a specialist formation, and people like, it's great when it works, but when it doesn't work, there's a lot that could go wrong with it. And the issue is that, so there's a data company, I can't remember what they're called, that Liverpool use when they looked for their replacement for Klopp, and that data found that, because they looked at, like, managerial philosophy and style of play and all the data that comes with it to find the best match for that squad, and what it found was Slot. And of course, forget the predictions I had for Liverpool at the start of the season, because I didn't think they would be anything close to what they were last season, let alone what they've been this season. But there's been just a seamless transition between the two managers, even with barely any signings. And considering I always thought that the team was just resembled and symbolized everything about Klopp himself, I thought, if you take the guy who's literally the whole thing of that team, the driving influence, everything about that team was built off Klopp almost, in the sense of, like, how different managers, different personalities are reflected in their philosophies. And I thought if they took that key component out, I didn't think Liverpool would match what they were doing under Klopp. I thought it was amazing how he pushed them to challenge on all four fronts for as long as he did last season, because they lost a lot of key players and didn't replace enough. And it was still a team that needed rebuilding. But obviously, I've been made to eat my words. But that data company that I mentioned, so they did an analysis of United squad, and they found that the current squad that obviously is built for 4-2-3, the 4-2-3-1 formation, it's arguably the worst, if not the absolute worst, compatible squad in the league for the system. Which, now, obviously, when Amorim was appointed, I actually thought a lot of these players, because they're professional footballers, and I thought these players had the attributes to be molded into these profiles, and I thought we'd see some squad continuity. But these 6 months that Amorim has had at United, it's almost showing that actually there's still a long way to go, and there's still a lot of work to do. We've got high earners, like, I know Casemiro's picked up in the last few weeks, but high earners like him and Marcus Rashford have been significantly underperforming, even in the 4-2-3-1, for a long, long time now, for about a year and a half. So now United are in a position where they need to move players on to just to get players that would actually fit the system. And the worst part is that a lot of these players, they're not getting value for money for. Whether it's wages, like the two examples I mentioned, whether it's transfer fees. We spent, what is it, £130 million, 120, 130 on Mason Mount and Rasmus Højlund, who one of them is constantly injured, which is a shame because he's actually tailor-made for this system. And then you've got Rasmus Højlund, who can't seem to score goals, unfortunately, and even if finishing is his best trait, the basics aren't there. It's like we went too big too soon on a young kid, and he's almost regressed since he's been here. Now, Ruben Amorim has precedent on his side, and I think I will do a video on what Amorim did at Sporting as a whole, case study, where Amorim went in and he sold a lot of players in a very short space. I think within a year, I think he got rid of like 19 players. I think it's something along those lines. I will have to double check this. there was quite a lot, built around youth players like Nuno Mendes, Mateus Nunes, and even they made some very good, smart, cheap signings that, because they were so like role efficient, a bit like the Moneyball concept where they buy players for cheap and they put them in roles that fit their statistics and data and everything, and their value skyrocketed. But I can't tell you the amount of profit that Sporting must have made on some of these players that they sold, like Ugarte, Nuno Mendes, even Gyökeres if he goes in the summer. So I think realistically, United could be smart with the business of outgoings, and it could really help fund this rebuild. Because the bottom line is, Amorim's not here to patch up Ten Hag's mess. He's here to build his own team. And unfortunately, in this scenario, it looks like sales are step one. So yeah, let's dive into it. Let's dive into this tier list. As you can see, I've managed to split it here in terms of goalkeeper, goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards. And like, the problem we've got is like, there's no telling what business United do, because I could sit here and say certain players should go now, but there is a good chance that the board may prioritize almost quick fire sales for a few players and fund for the immediate gaps. I will do another video, obviously, detailing where United specifically need to invest in the summer. I've obviously got other videos on, players for the 10 roles, left wing backs, because it's essential we get one. Even though obviously we've got Dorgu, even on the right hand side of wing backs, we are in desperate need of upgrades. So I will do another video looking into that, but I'll start off with the goalkeepers. I'm just going to get the easy one out of the way. Tom Heaton. No issue with Tom Heaton being there as a third choice goalkeeper. I think, you read stuff and you hear stuff about him, and I think he's just a good geezer to have around the place. Obviously experienced, played in the Premier League for Burnley, for Aston Villa. As I said, very experienced and just an all-round top professional. I think within the next year or so, he may leave or retire or whatever. So I'll just get that one out of the way. Altay Bayindir obviously had that absolute stinker of a performance against Spurs, and then almost basically redeemed himself against Arsenal a month later. And I think the issue Bayindir has is there's such a gap between games. He's not match fit as a goalkeeper. See, the problem is you get goalkeepers who, like Sergio Romero, they just come in and straight away they're just on it. But then you get a lot of other goalkeepers who they need a couple of games to like almost marinate in the team to get used to playing, because training and matches are two different things. And I think Bayindir has been a victim of that in a way where, was it Newport County he played in the FA Cup over a year ago, and then I don't think he played for United again until that Spurs game. And so, obviously he had a good game against Arsenal, but the gap was smaller, and I think he needs to play more frequently. I'll put him in jury's out for now because obviously he's a backup goalkeeper, but I think with the way with the next goalkeeper, I think the way things are going, I actually would, if I was Amorim, I would be considering Bayindir. Andre Onana is a weird one because there is a lot of data that supported him since he's come in. The amount of shots he's had to face, and how do I put this? He's a good goalkeeper, but he's not. It's like he's not a good goalkeeper. Like obviously we signed him because we wanted a ball playing goalkeeper. I don't think letting David De Gea go was the wrong thing. I think De Gea was ready to take a massive pay cut and then talked himself out of that contract. But I think that signing Onana probably is a mistake. There are worse goalkeepers, I will admit. There are games where he pulls off some big saves, but and I do respect his character a bit because he seems the kind of guy that he's open to criticism in a way. He can take accountability, but I just think that I don't know. I don't think he should leave now. But I will. I think I'm going to put him in leave within the next year because I think if we want to be challenging again, I don't think Andre Onana is the answer. Unfortunately, I think he's too inconsistent. You always. I think it's really bad if you're a defender or a fan or even the manager. I mean, Amorim had plenty of experience of poor goalkeepers at Sporting. With mistakes in them. So I think if United want to be serious again, I actually do think, unfortunately, they have to move Onana on. Now, that's not to say I don't back Onana. If he turns it around and he's more consistently solid, then of course I'll eat my words. I'm happy to. But at this moment in time, he's been here, almost 2 years now, and the inconsistencies and the mistakes. He did go on a poor run of form, like around Christmas time, and I get that not everyone can be. You're never going to find an Edwin van der Sar who's just solid all the time. But we're going to look at Liverpool and Manchester City, and even Arsenal to an extent with David Raya. They've got goalkeepers who consistently are solid and are good with their feet. And to get to that level, we can't have, especially a goalkeeper. Like, goalkeeper is one of the key positions you need to get right. Otherwise, there are going to be all sorts of issues that come with it. Victor Lindelof, I'm going to put in must leave. The guy survived another transfer window. There seems to be this ongoing narrative that he gets injured in transfer windows and somehow survives moving away. But I think numbers wise, we've got a lot of centre halves, but we really need to upgrade. And I will go into it a little bit about, especially in my video detailing what Amorim wants in this 3-4-3. Lindelof is all right on the ball, and as a backup, he wouldn't be so bad. But I just feel like it's for the wages, and Guy gets injured quite a bit. I just don't think he has a long-term future here. I think it's quite safe to say that. So I think it's time we move him on, because I think even if we start losing senior centre backs because player sales and funding, I feel like there is enough depth. Not just in what we've got currently, but also if we were to get rid of Lindelof, I think we've got enough centre backs even without him. And I think with younger centre backs coming through, we've had Aiden Heaven in the first team. There are plenty of other players in the youth team that actually probably would warrant a first team spot more than him a little bit. So I think that overall, there's a cost-cutting exercise, because I think the other thing as well, it's not just transfer fees, it's wages. And I don't exactly know what Victor Lindelof's wage is, but I feel like we're paying too much money for a sixth choice centre-half who's only playing as many sub-appearances as he is because of injuries. So I think it's best if we move on from Lindelof. Nussim Mazraoui, I won't put him in crucial. I won't put him on crucial because I see crucial as a very I don't know how to put this. He's been absolutely brilliant since he's come in. I think the only thing that's let him down this season is there are games where he's looked leggy because he's playing every game. And we sold Wan-Bissaka and people thought, we couldn't upgrade. And defensively, I thought so as well. But Mazraoui has really impressed me, so it shows how much I know. But I think he's really good. I think he has a part to play in this team, but I don't think it's as a wing back. I think he's all right going forward, but clearly what Amorim wants is he either wants bombing fullbacks or, you know, wingers with very good defensive contributions. So I feel like Mazraoui would be best as, you know, he's been playing a lot in the back three, and I think that's where his role. I think that's where he will be, because I think having fullbacks in the back three, defensively sound fullbacks, should I say, is really good, because there are defenders who, you know, will come to very soon. There are defenders who are very good in the back four, very good in the middle of a back three, but if you put them defending the wider channels, they struggle with all that space. And, you know, I brought up the Conte comparison earlier with Chelsea. You know, having Azpilicueta in that back three really did wonders for him. Tuchel as well. Tuchel had Azpilicueta playing as a right-sided centre-back, and it was brilliant. He was brilliant in that role, and I think that's where we'll see Mazraoui a lot more. Next one is Harry Maguire. Leave within the next year. This is not a criticism of Harry Maguire. You know, I believe we have extended his contract for a year. I'm pretty sure we have. And even if we haven't, that's what we're going to do. And I really like Harry Maguire. And, you know, obviously for years he's had all this criticism, and I don't really want to go too much into this, because I feel like everyone discusses it with Harry Maguire, that when you talk about him, you talk about how he's come out the other side of all that criticism. And for me, he has my respect for that, because some of the things he got, you know, the level of criticism he got was so bad. And the fact that mentally he just knuckled down and got to work that summer, where because it looked like he was going to leave under Ten Hag, and in the same summer he was going to leave, he went to a Ricardo Carvalho training camp, and he's looked solid last season. We all knew he was a solid defender, but it was questions about whether he could play in a high line. He's been really good, really solid for Ruben Amorim, and for at least another year. You know, I think maybe in a couple of years he might go, but I feel like Harry Maguire is a good backup option to have, not just for footballing purposes, but as a player to have in the dressing room. You know, just a professional who's there to just do the business. You know, I think he's a good person to have. You know, obviously he was ex-captain, and I feel like having the armband off of him is actually helping him a lot more, and we're seeing almost more leadership from him. So I don't want to ramble on about Harry Maguire, but I think just the way football is, with the age and with the contract situation, etc., I think with maybe next year he leaves on a free. But who's to say that he doesn't have another good year? And, you know, because the club are going to be methodical with their signings, they may go, well, we'll increase your contract another year. You know, Harry Maguire is the sixth choice centre half, fifth or sixth choice, as to help younger players also come through as well. It's not a bad thing, is it? So, yeah, I'll put him in there for now. But this is the problem with this category, because it's very much like these players I want to see. You know, realistically, they're probably either we should look to let them leave, or they would be looking to leave in a year for different reasons. The next one is Tyrone Malacia. He's out on loan, obviously, currently. He was injured for over a year, and I think that's quite insane. And obviously, he played a few games for Ruben Amorim. I just think we should cut our losses with him, or at least just, you know, we didn't pay that much money for him anyway, but I think it's best we move him on in the summer. You know, obviously he looked good in his first season, and then it all just went wrong. And I think the key thing here is the board and Amorim and United cannot afford players who are such a big injury scare, regardless of how cheap their wages are, regardless of how cheap or expensive their transfer fee is. you can't be having players on the payroll who aren't going to play. Which I know seems harsh, but if you want a highly efficient footballing machine of a team, you can't have these injury-prone players. Patrick Dorgu's the next one. I'll put him in will come good because, a very young player. Obviously, we just brought him in January. He's still very raw. But I like him a lot, and I like what he can give. I think we need. I don't know if we'll get it this summer, but definitely within a year, we need to get a proven option ahead of him. But I think he can grow I think he'll grow really well in this team. And if Amorim is here for the long haul and is some form of successful, whether it's, I don't know, it depends obviously what you would constitute success. If Amorim's here for 5 years, multiple top 4 finishes, trophies, like cups and stuff and regular challenging for the Premier League, I think Dorgu will definitely come good. If he's not as a starter, he'll definitely be like in that core of 15, 16 players that the manager has that he can put into the first 11. Lisandro Martinez is I'm going to put him in jury's out. I love Lisandro Martinez, and that first season he was immense. I have 2 worries with him. The first one is obviously his injuries. It is a real shame to see him get injured this much because he is such a good player and he's got future club captain vibes about him if he stays fit. He keeps getting these serious injuries. I don't even want to know if I don't even know if I want to say he's injury prone because I know it sounds ridiculous, but they're kind of different injuries. But it's just a lot of bad luck with that, and I think the issue is if he can't stay fit or can't show the level he used to, then I think the board they might look to move him on in the future. Maybe not this summer, definitely not this summer, because whether you like it or not, Lisandro Martinez is our best ball player centre-half. And my other issue with him is even though technically and statistically he can probably do the role Gonzalo Inacio had at Sporting under Amorim, Martinez has also shown a susceptibility in defending wide, like the wide kind of space at the back, and he's almost struggled in that role defensively. And I feel like one of the priorities should be to sign a left-sided centre-half, someone who is role-proven, someone who can defend that left channel. I want to see Lisandro Martinez play as a central centre-back because that role, Amorim has his, the player, that's the player in the back three who's the most confident in progressing the ball into midfield. And for me, that's what Lisandro Martinez is. He is the best ball-playing centre-half we have. And I think that when he comes back from injury, provided he can, I hope he can show the same level. I want to see him in that role a lot more, but I want to see us sign a left-sided centre-half because then I think if you get that and you have Martinez in the middle, I think that's where you get the best out of Lisandro Martinez. The next one is Harry Amas. Which is a bit of an interesting one because I find it crazy how he's gone so long without actually getting into the team. Obviously, he made an appearance against Leicester recently in the Premier League, but he had a very good pre-season, and we've obviously we agreed to sign Diego Leon for the summer. Another left wing back coming in. There were question marks there were talks that potentially Aston Villa might make a move for him. There were question marks about how ready was Harry Amas physically to come into the first team. But I think, I'm going to put him in can come good. I won't put him in jury's out. I'll put him in can come good because from what we've seen, I feel like he'd be a very good asset to have in the future. I don't know if he needs a loan. I don't know if he needs more integration into the first team, but more of a careful one. So, like, let's not throw him in for the sake of throwing him in. Let's not throw him in because we've got unless we have to because of injuries. But give him a few appearances here and there. Obviously, we're at the late end of the season, so he might get some game time potentially between if we progress far in the Europa League, maybe between the weekends between the two legs. But I think obviously if he develops physically and maintains the progress he had until now, especially last summer, I don't see why he can't be an option in the future. I know it kind of contradicts what I'm saying. Like, well, hang on, if we've got Leon coming in, if I've said we need a more proven left wing back ahead of Dorgu, where's Amas going to fit in? What are we going to do with all these wing backs? It's obviously it's all scenario related. It's all scenario based. So if this happens, if this happens, if this happens. But I think if it happens for the player, it happens for the player, and I think he could be a good option. Aiden Heaven. I won't put him in crucial yet. I think it's an excellent bit of business, the fact that we got him for next to nothing, compensation package or not. I was very surprised when we signed him that they emphasized that he was a first team signing, not a youth team signing. And since he's come in, he's looked good, and there is a player there. And I think he used to play in central midfield. Actually, I mean, it might have been defensive midfield, but he definitely played in midfield at some point in his youth career. And I think that is a good asset to have for him in terms of potentially reading the game and as a ball player, to be comfortable on the ball. And I think that physically looks good. Obviously, he's still a bit raw, but I think he will come good. I think he, for me, will hopefully be a testament to the fact that there is still the United way moving forward. There are people obviously upset about potential players, leaving that are academy graduates, etc. But the fact that we've got young players coming in who will have a path to the first team is still there. That's part of United way. Having a system that gets the best out of youth, which is what I think Amorim will have when if the 3-4-3 is to be successful and if he's here long term. I think that's what we'll have. So yeah, Aiden Heaven I think will come good. I won't put him in crucial yet, but I think he's been really good until now, and long may it continue. Matthijs de Ligt, I'm going to put Lenny Euro in crucial because this guy is the real deal. This guy looks the business. He's only had one hiccup, and that was the Southampton game. And ever since then, he's still been all right. So, well, I say all right. He's been really good. I think I still kind of don't get how. I still kind of can't believe that we prized him away from the lure of Real Madrid. I think obviously the transfer fee and the club he was at had something to do with that. But this guy looks the real deal, and I think this guy is he's just going to get better and better. I think he has made that right centre back position his own. I just think he's just really good. He's so good, and he could be our centre back for the next 10 years. I know football doesn't have that element of realism about it. In 5 years' time, Real Madrid may come calling, but he'll have a lot of resale value, and they will definitely profit from him. But I don't want to start talking about selling our better players now. So, yeah, Leniora, I think, will be crucial for us long term. I think he'll be really good in this system. He's good on the ball. He's athletic. He's getting bigger as well. Like, he's putting some muscle on. Hopefully, he doesn't put too much on, like the failed gym programs of the last 10 years, but he just looks good. Matthijs de Ligt is an interesting one. I'm going to come back to him now. I don't know, because I really like Matthijs de Ligt, and I feel like I don't want to put him in crucial. He is. Do you know what? I'll put him in. Or can come good. He is coming good. He's looking really good, and what he brings to the table is he's still quite young. We're seeing the best of him now, which is quite. We're seeing him come good. We're not seeing the best of him. We're seeing him come good. There was a worry that how did we sign someone who comes from the school of defending in Juve with, Chiellini, Bonucci, and goes to Bayern Munich after that immense spell he had at Ajax, and now does he keep leaving these top clubs? It's quite worrying, but I think he is coming good and will continue to do so. He could go within the next year or so, potentially, depending on what profile of players we sign and how does he fit in to the system long term. But I think he's a more than capable centre back in this system, at least for the short terms. And even if he's here long term, I don't think you can go wrong with Matthijs de Ligt playing regular games, even if it's a rotation centre back that's always coming off the bench or always starting every other game. So I think he's really good, and I think he's coming good. I'm going to put Dalot and juries out because we have seen the best and the worst of Dalot, and he is really frustrating to watch sometimes. I like him personally. I think if he was playing in the back four of Real Madrid, for example, I don't think he'd look that bad, which I know sounds crazy to say, but every all-star team has not a dodgy fullback, but has that average that isn't quite there with all the franchise players, but does the business. He's all right, does the business, is solid, and the team respects him, the players like him, and they keep him around. The problem I've got with Dalot is he is so frustrating going forward. He's very predictable. A lot of times he doesn't seem to find it's so frustrating because tonight Dalot wasn't that bad tonight. Dalot was actually quite good, I think. I think he saw the shift in this evening against Lyon in the first leg. But in other games, he just does some things where it's like his footballing IQ just is not there, and it's quite frustrating to watch. There are times when we're going forward that he doesn't have the urgency that Amorim needs in a wing back of getting forward. And I think it's quite worrying. I think maybe that's why I put him in juries out, because I think for a couple of years as a backup, he wouldn't be so bad. If you've got enough, I think we need to upgrade on him. I feel like I would like to see him. I would like to see him in the back three as an experiment, but obviously not if it's going to cost us a game. I want to see that level of experimentation. I want to see if because there are games he's had for us where he's actually been really good defensively, and there are games he has for us where he isn't, and there are games he's had where he's poor for us going forward, and vice versa. So it's, I've seen someone use the word bird brain on Twitter for him. I'm not going to say that's accurate, but what I am going to say is the fact that what I'm going to say is that it's just jury's out on him, and we'll see how he fares. The next two are easy. Luke Shaw, quite cynically, as great as he would be as a left centre back in this formation, The guy is not fit anymore. The guy is never fit anymore. He's nowhere to be seen. And it's so frustrating that we can't keep having players on the payroll, as I said before, that just don't give you value for money. And Luke Shaw is one of the worst for value for money because we're paying, I don't know how much we're paying him, but he's never fit. He's never fit. And it's so frustrating to have this dependence on a player. As good as he would be in our system, he's never fit. And we have to look to offload him. Johnny Evans, a little bit different. Not cynically, but, what is he, 37, can leave for free this year. Hero, there isn't much to say really, just heroes farewell. I'd keep him for another year potentially as someone else around the dressing room, but realistically, he could just retire this summer. So we don't know, but I think he's only played a couple of games for Amorim of sub appearances. I'm not entirely sure actually how many appearances he's made. That's quite bad of me. But yeah, come on, Johnny, retire. Now, midfield. Mason Mount. This is a difficult one because I was never for the Mason Mount transfer in the first place. Not just for the fee, but for the profile of player. For me, he is a testament to everything that was wrong for United under Ten Hag. He gave the manager all the power. He was adamant he wanted players, and the board didn't say no to facilitating deals, which is annoying because us United fans wanted someone else to have the power from the board because it didn't seem the board were backing managers for years. But at the same time, for an English international who'd come off quite a bad season for Chelsea, that had seen him injury hit at some points, which I didn't think was an issue as such then. But was it 55 plus 5 we paid for Mount? We're not getting any value for money. And considering the last year of the contract, it makes it even worse what kind of transfer it was. And the fact that there were so many other midfielders that probably would have been better suited, that weren't so injury prone, that we could have got maybe for the same price or cheaper, I think it's quite frustrating. And it's annoying because he's actually tailor-made for this system. I think he would be exceptional in this system. But unfortunately, I mean, there is the report that the club were looking to, have their own Mason Mount project in the way of let's see if we can get him back fit and to stay consistently fit and get him playing. And I think if we've let Luke Shaw get away with it for so long, we may as well. I mean, I'm all for Mount leaving this summer because we're not getting value for money at all. He's barely playing. But on the other hand, given the report, obviously, that the club were looking into a restoration project for him, and the fact that he is tailor-made for this system, I would suggest that probably the club will look to move him on in a year if he can't get fit again. Bruno Fernandes, I'm going to put in crucial because I don't think Bruno Fernandes will obviously be here long term. Obviously it depends on what you consider long term, but the guy is the captain, and he seems to be one of the few players right now who are grabbing games by the scruff of the neck and actually producing. I know there is this constant division between fans about whether Bruno is a good footballer or not. But I think he's a crucial player in this team. Whether you think he's a good captain or not is obviously to each their own. But unfortunately, the way I see it is, this guy is still doing a job whilst being shifted around in this system. He's playing in one of the 10s. He's playing in the midfield pivot, and he's still doing well. So, for at least a couple of years, of course, you keep Bruno Fernandes around. Obviously, look, if Saudi Arabia or Real Madrid or someone come in with £100 million offer in the summer, the board will probably look at it and they might facilitate that move. But for me, he is one of the probably the most crucial player in the team. Right, who's next? Christian Eriksen. I think there's already reports that look like he might be leaving. I really like Christian Eriksen, but he just does. Apart from that first 6 months he had under Ten Hag, he's not really looked the same. He doesn't seem to have the legs. And this system, you need legs. As great as he would be on the vision that Amorim has of the control side of it, we're not there yet. And Christian Eriksen doesn't have the legs, so it just looks like it's just going to move on this summer. Right. Toby Collier. I'm going to put him in jury's out because it's a young player, and I feel like we haven't seen enough of him, I don't think. I like him. I like what I've seen of him. There's not much else to go on. I think that's the biggest issue. He had a good preseason for Ten Hag. He's made some decent sub appearances for Amorim since he's, being in and around the first team. But I feel like we haven't seen enough of him exposed in the first team picture to see whether he's got it or not. But there's always a good chance that we, maybe within a year's time we'll have a better idea of what he's about, and then maybe he will come back in a year's time with his tier list and think, okay, he will come good or can come good, or vice versa. I think he's going to be going. So, yeah. Casemiro is a weird one. His form has picked up in the last 6 or so weeks. He's looked good. Tactical tweak from Amorim has got this like 3-4-3 with a diamond. Especially against Sociedad, I thought Casemiro looked really good. I think the issue Casemiro has is obviously his legs and his wages. Those are the two biggest issues for me. I did want to see Casemiro play as a central centre-back in this system. I know that sounds crazy, but you're asking him to stay in the middle of a back three, be disciplined, progress into midfield, and you're protected around you. Obviously, when he was doing centre-back in a back four, it's a different story. But in a back three, you're well protected. And considering Amorim's defensive shape sometimes has it in a 5, I actually think Casemiro would be quite good. Look, I think I'm gonna put him in leave within the next year because I think there are still discussions as to whether they'd keep him around. I think his experience is obviously key. I just think that am I letting his form play into this a little bit? Maybe, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I think Casemiro has something to offer as a squad player, but it's whether he wants to leave or I think the board will let him go if the right offer comes in. But I think within the next year, I think Casemiro is gone. So if it's not this summer, it'll definitely be next summer. I'm going to put Ugarte and will come good. Obviously, he was crucial for Amorim in the system at Sporting, and obviously he made that move to PSG. But since Amorim's come in, there's obviously we signed him. United signed him, they paid good money for him. Ten Hag doesn't seem to fancy him. Amorim comes in, and obviously we're thinking, okay, this is a match made in heaven. We've already got this guy who's already role like efficient for what Amorim wants. The problem I'm having is after about 60-70 minutes in a lot of matches, Ugarte's coming off. I don't know if he's tired. I don't know if he's carrying some kind of injury, but it's worrying me a little bit how frequently it happens. He's not old either. I think he's 23, 24. So the fact that this happening worries me, but I think if it's a fitness issue and he can get it up, then fantastic. Then he'll definitely come good. He's already proven he can do this role in Portugal. So, I think everything is there. There is a lot of precedent for Ugarte. I think what let him down at the big move to PSG was I don't think he fit the system as well, and he never seemed to settle into Paris. He never seemed to settle in, and that was his biggest issue. And then he just didn't play a lot because obviously his fit in the system wasn't that great. So yeah, so I think that I think he'll come good, but we need to see what's going to happen with this 60, 70-minute sub because this thing used to happen to Donny van der Beek whenever he started, and it was quite worrying, especially when the fans kept calling for Donny van der Beek to start, and that happened. The other thing with Ugarte is people keep talking about what he's like technically, and I just don't see how that is a big thing for people because you don't need all your midfielders to be technically incredible, right? I know that sounds weird because it's the midfield and the way the game is going, everyone seems to be technically good. But Conte had Matic and Kante. Kante was not gifted technically. It was decent, and it was quite good technically, but obviously a lot of what he brought to the table with strength was not, playing 60-yard balls like that. His was all about defensive contribution, breaking up play, a lot of energy. So I think Ugarte will be fine, and I think he will come good. I don't know. I have faith because he's done it before in this system for this manager. So, yeah. Nothing else needs to be said. I don't want to sell him. I don't want us to give in to these big wage demands that are apparently happening. I think it's just agent talk. I don't think it's coming from him. Kobbie Mainoo, incredible talent. There is 100% a role for him. The only issue I've got, I'll put him in crucial because he will be, I think if he can nail down a specialty, he'll be fine. Because for me, he can play anywhere in the midfield. He can either play in the pivot or he can play in the tens. I think his best role might be in the tens. Because I think there are certain games like Anfield away, for example, those kind of games may be playing, a bit more of a defensive option in there next to Ugarte, for instance, and then Kobbie Mainoo further forward. I think would be better. There are games where you'd have pivot, where you'd have Mainoo in the pivot. Sorry, especially if it's going to be matches where you're going to have more of the ball and you're going to be more in control of the game, those are the games where you can have Mainoo in the pivot next to Ugarte. But I think there is absolutely a role for him. I think there's obviously the Seedorf links, there's the Thiago Alcantara links. I think he's just brilliant, and I think 100% crucial. Now, I mentioned Dan Gore beforehand. I think he goes within the next year. I know, obviously, youth player from the academy. He's been out on loan multiple times, and the most recent one, there seems to be this narrative that he's having fitness issues. He can't seem to stay fit. And that is quite worrying. I think more than one person has said this about him as well. So I don't know if the jump from, youth football to men's football fitness-wise is a bit much for him. I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing because obviously professional footballer, but at the same time, I don't know if he lasts. This guy is always on the cusp. I think he's a good player, but I think he's going to be one of those youth academy players that end up moving on. that don't see a pathway into the first team, or at least don't get the pathway and eventually make that transfer elsewhere, or make that loan transfer elsewhere to get first team football, and then it moves around, Championship, League One, etc. That's not to say his quality is poor. It's just, I think the comments are worrying. I'm going to get the easy for the forwards. I'm going to get the easy ones out of the way because I've been chatting for an hour, and if you've still stuck around for this, I am amazed. Jadon Sancho can leave if it will let me. There we go. Jadon Sancho can leave. No two ways about it. I think the guy is done in the Premier League. I think he's done at United. I'd be very surprised if he comes back in because he has shown nothing at Chelsea that says to me he can be in one of the 10 positions. I can say to you, yeah, he was good at Dortmund years ago because he played a similar role for Dortmund before we signed him. But with all due respect, that was nearly 4 years ago now. And I don't know. I think the excuses have run out for Sancho. And I think United would be best, especially for his wages as well. His wages are very high. United don't need to just offload him cash-wise. It needs to be for his wages. Because if he comes back, I highly doubt we will get value for money for those wages. Where he goes, I don't know. To be honest with you, I could not care less. I just hope Chelsea don't decide to pay £5 million to give him back to us and make him our problem again. Knowing Chelsea, they might just end up paying the 25 million and then try and sell him on the same summer. I think that's where it's at for him right now. I'm going to put Ethan Wheatley in jury's out because, haven't seen much of him. Obviously, he's out on loan right now, but I haven't seen much of him. But I'm very curious to see what will happen. I'm going to put Ahmad in. Do I put him in crucial? See, this is very difficult. I'll do that. There we go. Sorry about this. There were some duplicates there, so I couldn't get rid of them, annoyingly. I've had a very good feeling about Ahmad for a few years now, I will admit. And I think his importance in the team skyrocketed almost, especially after Ten Hag got sacked. There is definitely a player there. You can see it. I can see it. Everyone can see it. I think if he can stay fit, not saying that in a perspective of saying he's injury prone. I don't think he's injury prone. But what I will say is that I don't want anything to happen to him because, the curse of Man United is real in terms of injuries. But I think Ahmad can be an exceptional player for us, a very crucial player for us in the next 5-10 years. Plays the right 10, exceptional. Plays a right wing back, exceptional. He's almost a victim of his own success there because I worry that we might end up having to play him as a right wing back at times because he's just so good. He's such an honest player that he still grafts, even though he's so good going forward as well. But he gives you that option, which I love. And I just think that regardless of where he plays, he's just going to be absolute mint. So for me, he has to go in crucial. He has to go crucial. Joshua Zirkzee. I'll put him in will or can come good. Technically a striker, not a lethal goal scorer. Still getting goals. He's still scoring goals, scoring important goals. I've really loved what he's been doing in that hybrid role. He's that hybrid player who I think the good thing for United actually is we can move on a striker this summer. Like we could move on Højlund for example, this summer. Bring in a striker just to replace Højlund and no more. I think what Xerxes offers is that adaptability where whether it's as the number 9 he can play. I prefer him in that left 10 role because I think you really see the best out of him. You see how good his link-up play is. Since he's gotten himself much fitter, he's looking a lot better. He's just so good on the ball for a guy that tall as well. So I absolutely love Xerxes. He might go in 2 or 3 years. Like someone might sign him because he'd be a better fit there, for example, in a role they have. But for me, out of the 2 strikers we've got, because obviously I'll be doing a video to cover this, but United are obviously looking at strikers. If I had to pick one to keep, I know which one I'm keeping, and it's him, unfortunately, because he is, he's really doing the business. He's grafting as well, by the way. He's not just scoring goals. Forget that. Forget output. He's grafting, and you can see that. He's coming off the pitch. His shirt is like drenched in sweat. He's moving around a lot. Really good player to have in this dressing room, I think. And I think he will come good under Ruben Amorim, at least in the short term. There is a good chance that maybe in a couple of years he may move on. May go back to Serie A, may end up in Germany. Who knows? But I think he's really good. Chido is an interesting one. Couple of appearances he's had, he's looked decent. Obviously comes with this reputation at youth level. Charlie McNeil had a reputation at youth level, and it didn't translate well for United. Not that he got many opportunities anyway. I'm not comparing the two. I'm going to put in can come good because there is obviously a lot of potential there. And I think that, I think as a third choice striker in the first team squad, to eventually he'll, I think he will come good. He'll start scoring more goals as he, grows. I think there needs to be a gradual progression into the team for him. And I think that's what he's going to get. And if he's as good as youth level suggests, we have a monster on our hands. And I bloody hope we see that from him. I'm really intrigued to see what the next year has in store for him. I don't know what the next step would be for him. I would assume that he would be flirting with the first team again from the under 23s this time. But we'll wait and see. Marcus Rashford. I done a video discussing Marcus Rashford. I think it was my first video. And I spent half of it talking about how much I love Marcus Rashford. Unfortunately, it's best for everyone he goes. Footballing reasons, it's just not working out at United. And there's this whole thing with Amorim that happened. Can United come back from it? Can he come back from it? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure. I think for pure profit and value for money, I think we'll look to offload, because for the wages as well, we've not been getting value for money for the wages, even though he's not been bad this season. I do feel for him a little bit this season because his performances have not been as bad as people suggested. And then after November, we didn't see him. Played the first couple of games for Amorim in the Premier League, and then we didn't see him after that. I don't know, obviously, the ins and outs of it. But I think it's best for Marcus Rashford anyway. If he's not wanted at United, it's best for him to move on. That's it. I love Marcus Rashford. I love what he's done at the club since he's been here. I won't go into comments made that fans make and the toxicity around him. You know, there's games where he got the blame for stuff that he weren't nearly as bad as other players for. Like, it's just ridiculous at some point, and I just think that it's best for everyone he moves on. Where he goes, I don't know if Villa made that transfer permanent, not because they don't rate him as a player or that he's been bad, but it's the wages. Is he going to come down from them? But we'll have to wait and see. Anthony is a weird one because he's gone on loan and he's doing really good there. But Amorim made some interesting comments about obviously how physicality of different leagues differ and they affect players differently, in the sense that a player can physically be good for La Liga but not for the Premier League. You know, same with having time and space on the ball, for example. And I think Anthony has benefited a lot from that in La Liga and as such got his confidence back. Whether we keep him or sell him, I had no issue in keeping him in January, actually. I was disappointed he went out on loan because what I saw was us losing forwards and not being able to replace them. And, you know, we're seeing players exposed in the forward positions as much as they are because we've got no options. Let alone, you know, I've seen people call for Marcus Rashford that he shouldn't have gone out on loan, because there are games we have where the likes of Garnacho play that, you know, doesn't do the business, you know, in terms of putting it in the back of the net. Rashford can. But for me, I look at it as like if you want to drop Garnacho, we need forwards. And I think Anthony would have been sound as a backup wing back option to have. You know, because I think there were times where he came off the bench and he looked all right in those roles. And I don't think we could have done wrong with that. I don't know why. I have this weirdest feeling that we will want a fee for him. We won't be able to get rid of him. And he'll either go out on loan or he'll stick around for a year. It sounds mental, but I think it's one of those where it just doesn't happen. So, I mean, obviously, leave within the next year still obviously means he can leave this summer still. But I just think that I'm not saying there is a place for Anthony at Manchester United. You know, I want to say just end the nightmare for him. Just go. And I think the board might have it in them to be ruthless with the sales. But I think that if out of all the players you have on loan, you decide that actually we can only keep one of them, when you look at on the face of it, you've got, in terms of senior players, just exclude Dan Gore and Ethan Wheatley for a moment. I think if you look at Malacia, Sancho, Rashford and Anthony, I think obviously the club will want to look to move all of them on, but I think you can do worse than keeping Anthony for another year. Whether it's fitness, whether it's just performance, whether it's just value from, in fact, both of them value for money in general, high wages, and obviously he was a big transfer fee. I think that you can do worse. Now, the last two, probably two of the most criticized players recently, and rightly so. I'm going to start with Garnacho, because it's I might end up doing a video on Garnacho exclusively. Garnacho doesn't fit the system. And I was very much of the opinion that Rashford, Garnacho, and Bruno all won't play together. They won't survive together. And obviously Rashford was the first casualty. But I think Garnacho is probably the least suitable for the system. And what doesn't help is I don't know what's happened to him, but he seems to have regressed. He seems to play football like he's already been running around for 120 minutes before the match has even started. You saw what his legs were like at the end of the Liverpool game last year in the FA Cup, just running around constantly for 120 minutes. He plays football each game almost like he's had that before the match, and his decision-making's been atrocious, and I don't want to hear age being a factor because I'm all for protecting players of a young age, but at the same time, like, we've seen him do better. We've seen him provide better. We've seen him do the business output-wise, but I think he focuses too much on the output and his decision-making. He seems to always make the wrong pass. He seems to never think when he's got the ball and he's approaching the penalty area, whether he's taken a heavy touch or a defender's charging him down or both. Instead of passing it to a nearby player, he seems to always just shoot for the sake of it, and it is so frustrating to watch because there's a lot of chances that go amiss because he shoots over or he shoots and it's blocked or he shoots wide or it's just dreadful. And I'm all for a player trying again and again and getting their confidence up because let's have it right, this team has been confidence shot a lot of this season, especially the last two players on this list. But it's just continuously happening and he doesn't seem to be fixing it. When Napoli offered the money in January, I was actually for taking the money because what I saw was a sellable asset for profit who doesn't fit the system. And I'm all for players like being molded to fit the system, but I don't know. If we get that kind of offer again this summer, I actually think we should take it. I know he's an academy graduate. I know there was a lot of high hopes for him. I feel like the fan base is a little bit at fault for this as well when they've overrated him as the next Ronaldo. I've always seen it, right? But at the same time, he's not there. He's nowhere there yet. And it's very frustrating just watching him every game, and he just does the wrong things a lot because there's a good player in there. And I want to know what happened to that, that 18-year-old who wore the 49 shirt, this raw kid who just did not care who he was up against, would run past them, would, make a good pass, would do all the right things, could finish as well. I don't know what's happened to him. But it's, I don't know. I like what he could be, but what he is right now is frustrating me. So I'm going to put him cynically in leave within the next year. And in a year's time, I'll probably come back to this and I could probably eat my words. He's had a proper preseason, he's been molded into that left 10, but for that kind of money, put it into perspective, we could sell him for 60 million, and Almada and Cherki, both really good 10s at Lyon, both played well tonight, in my opinion. I mean, I've liked Almada for a long time. Cherki, I've known about for a good while. Lyon are obviously a bit of a club that are in financial, crap, and they need to sell. I think £60 million that you get pure profit for Garnacho gets both of them. I'm obviously in realistic world that probably doesn't happen, but why keep Garnacho for 60 and risk losing out on £60 million profit when, in hope we get that kind of money, we could sign Burma or Cunha, two players who are on the cusp of elite, and once they make that big transfer, their quality will unleash. That Mane transfer at Liverpool, that kind of transfer where they make the step up. Jota had it when he moved to Liverpool. They make that step up and they go to another level. And I feel like, I think that there is a lack of patience now, not just with the fan base, but with the football club as well, where they don't want to see people given more time than necessary. Because a lot of players have had that the last 10 years. And I feel like there is going to be a bit of ruthlessness about it. And I think if Garnacho isn't doing the business, I don't think the board will hesitate to move him on and bring in one or two younger players who would fit the system better. So I think that's a possibility. Obviously, if he improves his game and if he suddenly comes back and we see the best of him, then fair enough. But at this moment in time, it's not looking good. Lastly, Rasmus Højlund. On the face of it, Rasmus Højlund has always been this raw striker who could be a good finisher. He didn't have enough time in the first team Atlanta, though, to warrant that kind of fee. I think it was ridiculous we spent that kind of money on him, and he has regressed, unfortunately. And I do feel bad for him in that regard. But at the same time, I don't know if he needs a loan to another Premier League club or back to Italy to develop. But what he needs to be an understudy. He seems so short of confidence. He just doesn't seem to do the basics right. He seems to make the wrong runs or not make runs. He tends to spend more time, wrestling or focusing on what the defender he's up against is doing as opposed to what he's doing. And I don't think we're going to make the money back we spent on him, but I just think I do feel for the guy. And I know people say he had a good season last season, but he had a very good purple patch between Christmas Day and mid-February. So for 2 months, he had a very good purple patch. But then after that, he didn't score. I know he was injured for a few weeks, but then, and he scored, 2 or 3 goals towards the end of the season. And then this season, he just hasn't done it. And I don't buy into this. He doesn't get any service because he doesn't help himself either. So I don't know what he needs, to be honest. I don't want to give up on him because he's a young kid, but at the same time, it's, Atlanta don't sign bad strikers. Atlanta have a history of making good strikers. And I think what he needed, actually, was another year under Gasperini at Atlanta to develop. And then we sign him. I'll never understand why Ten Hag decided, okay, instead of pushing for Kane, let's do 30 million pounds less for Rasmus Højlund. I think it was ridiculous. But that was the level of the incompetence that was at Manchester United in the summer of 2023. What do we do with him? Do you know what? I'm going to put him in leave within the next year, same as Garnacho, because I think, obviously, there were reports coming out today that teams in Italy were looking at him. And to be honest, these two, Garnacho and Højlund, I think if we can somehow get £100 million from Napoli for them, because I think Conte would do really well with both of them. Højlund would be an understudy and would be able to develop, and Garnacho would be exactly what Conte wants in a left winger. But I feel like if I'm putting Garnacho in there, who has shown a lot of good since he's been at United, then I've got to put Højlund in there as well. It's not fair me saying jury's out on him just because he was a big money signing and you can hope it could come good. So I think at this moment in time, I think the club would be best to maybe just be ruthless. There will be players who will be afforded time, but I think there are players who shouldn't be afforded time. Like Harry Maguire is coming good, but I think realistically he might leave in the next year or so. Due to his age and the contract situation, and maybe an influx of players. So yeah, that's Jesus Christ. That's a long time. That's an hour and 20 minutes. That's my tier list done. I'm sorry to have rambled on as much as I did. But there we have it. Those are my thoughts for, United's, what I think United should be this summer. The bottom line is United squad is a mess, and it doesn't fit the system. And there are players in there like Mainu and Ahmad and Euro who could be a great spine, a great core to have for the next 5-10 years, long term. But I just think at this moment in time, even though it seems to be a dysfunctional United that isn't all there because it's been a bad season, etc., I think the club will be ruthless enough to let go of players who aren't specialist profile, especially for a system like this. This system needs the specialist of profiles. And I don't think the likes of Garnacho, and Højlund, who aren't doing the business, and even players like Diogo Dalot, who I would say a jury's out on, moving forwards in the system, they may not fit. Of course, they'll be better fit elsewhere. There'll be better fits elsewhere, you know what I mean? And I don't want to see any revisionism if they were to leave this summer and do well in systems that fit the profile. Clubs that don't just sign United cast-off for the sake of signing players. They sign United cast-offs because it's a player they see that they can fit in their system. They're only deemed cast-offs because United don't want them for the squad, So I think the bottom line is it's going to be an interesting summer. I'll do a video on signings, different profiles United would look to move for or need to move for. But that for me, there is my list of players who I think won't be here long term and who might be here long term. So cheers for tuning in. I hope you have a very good weekend. And, as I said, my name is Julio. You can follow me on my socials. The socials are all there. Just there. Sorry. I'm just getting used to this whole streaming thing again. So, at Julio Leschi on Twitter, at Red Brew Review on Twitter as well. Like I said, I've got some more content coming out. I've obviously mentioned different videos I'll potentially be doing. I've got an interview with Brian from Stretton News coming out soon. Hopefully in the very near future. So hopefully that hopefully they can all go to plan. Obviously, like I said, life's got in the way last few months. I've not been able to do much or any content. But hopefully I'm looking to come back with the content now. So cheers for tuning in. Let me know what your thoughts are, whether you think I'm wrong, whether you think certain players we should keep, certain players we shouldn't keep, that I've said, okay, maybe we should keep. And I'll talk to you guys later. So have a good one, and